Um, yeah, this last 2 years has definitely been like a pretty weird time for us as a band. We have like there've been whenever there's been like a little gap, we have made dashes back and forth. So as we were coming towards the end of finishing the record, there was like a little lull in cases, and I did get to, because we were working in this studio in Dandenong, and we did have a few fun, nice, creative, really fun, memorable sessions in the studio. Just the two of us, the two of us in this weird, windowless, dark little room in Dandenong, making this album. And then yeah, we did get one. We got one little tour away. We did that Port Road tour, which had a few reschedules and a few cancellations, and like I was in quarantine for a bit. But yeah, it's been like in the full 2 years, it'll just be like I think we did 3 shows more or less, like the Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne.
Wow. Wow. Which is, yeah, unfathomable almost, isn't it? If you thought about that 2 years ago, you would have thought no chance. But well, hopefully it will all be scheduled shortly, and you'll be off on the road, and things will return to something approaching normal, which would be great. But I mean, before we talk more about that album, I actually wanted to go back a little bit further into your catalogue, because there are a couple of songs which you've released which were finalists in the Vanda and Young Global Songwriting Award, and that songwriting competition is actually still open now. So songwriters from all around the world, whether they're published or unpublished, can enter the Vanda and Young Songwriting Award. I think it's one of the world's most prestigious songwriting competitions. $80,000 in potential prize money, so it has the potential to change any songwriter's lives out there. And all the profits go to an incredible not-for-profit organisation called Nordoff Robbins Australia, which uses music therapy to improve the lives of children and adults who are suffering from a range of difficulties, whether they're emotional or social or physical or psychological. So it's an incredible competition, incredible cause. And if there are any songwriters watching this, you can still enter at apraamcos.com.au until November the 4th. But the 2 songs in question I wanted to start by talking to you about are Teach Me About Dying, which was one of the finalists in 2019. And Tim, I've seen you refer to that song as a play in 2 acts. What are those acts?
Oh my God! It's one of
Could that be
I hate being
the
quoted.
2 dying songs?
Oh, I have no idea. Play in 2 acts. What the hell was I talking about? I mean, the song is a play. Yeah, I guess I know what I must have meant. The song's kind of like follows, like if you listen to the lyrics carefully, it's like this story of like a person who like arrives at a party, and they're like standing out on the street. It's like rain in the street light. Which door is yours? He's trying to work out where the party is, and in this apartment block, and knocks on the door, and then he's in the party, and he's like gets handed a glass of wine, and then music comes on the radio, and he wants to dance and stuff, and then I think it must be the chorus, and then in the second part, it's really late, and he starts walking home, and it's raining, and he's completely drenched, and the road is the sea, and the character has this like epiphany about I guess this is like sort of melancholy, a somewhat appreciation for life in the face of death kind of thing. But it's been so long since I've thought about it that you did catch me off guard there. But yes.
So how does that story, as it unfolds, how does that relate to that idea about teach me about dying so I can learn how to live?
Well, I mean, it's like so many things with songwriting. You're always like collecting. Like, I've been using the word lately of like a bower. Is it a bowerbird that are always like collecting little like blue shiny things?
Yeah, right.
And I feel like songwriting is often, all these little ideas that you collect, and then you sort of put them together, and then they come out. But I was listening to a podcast about death and they were sort of interviewing people who worked in like palliative care about, you know, how they would discuss death with patients and things like that. And I just remember finding it really powerful. And there was a nurse who worked in this hospital, and she had this line in the podcast, which was when you spend so much time working here, you learn a lot about death and you learn a lot about life. And so that line really stuck out to me, and so I kind of flipped it and was like, teach me about dying so I can learn how to live. Like, that was kind of like it was actually one of the few songs I've ever written where the chorus came first, because I was like, I want to write a song that's the chorus, teach me about dying so I can learn how to live. And then we kind of built the verses around it, which is kind of usually we write verses and then we kind of like, we need a chorus, what are we going to do? But that's how that one kind of played out.
And
does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, yeah. And the song has that real mix of melancholy on the one hand, but jubilation on the other. And it's almost kind of summed up in that line about teach me about dying so I can learn, so I can learn how to live. Is that a tricky balance, Oscar? Is that a tricky balance musically to capture?
So the sort of melancholy, perhaps, of the lyrics combined with the jubilation of the music, or something, maybe.
I mean,
that
just to
juxtaposition.
Capture those moods in the same song.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, actually, it would be harder to not have that juxtaposition. So what I mean by that is to have a happy song with happy lyrics.
Right.
Or, I mean, I don't think happy is a very broad term. It's a bit too loose, but you know what I mean? Like a jubilant song with jubilant lyrics is a bit obvious, you know? I think sometimes it's necessary to me as a person to jump up and down with sadness because I don't know. I mean, I just feel like sometimes I think it's like the absurdity of life. You have to like laugh in the face of the absurdity of life, you know? So the idea is that we're all going to die, so you might as well have fun or enjoy your life. For example, that's an example. That's not necessarily to do with that song. But I just feel like sometimes writing a sad song with really sad music is kind of actually quite hard to do because it can sound really morose or morbid or something like that. So sometimes writing an up-tempo song like Teaching About Dying, but with these lyrics that, to be honest, there is a jubilance to the lyrics. The verses are very kind of almost hopeful or something and free. And there's a liberty, I think, that comes when, I mean, I've never directly faced death myself, but when a family member does, for example, it causes you to reflect on your life and you sort of have a liberty from the constraints of your everyday life for a moment, you know? And so I think there's something in that. So in a way, it kind of makes sense to me to contrast the happy, sad thing. And we do that a bit in our music in general.
Yeah.
Other songs of ours kind of do that a bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
Without necessarily meaning to, but it does happen a bit.
Sure. Are there other artists that perhaps when you were younger and you were learning about music, there are other artists that you thought captured that really well and that really appealed to you?
God, you know, I'm not sure. The Cure sometimes do it a bit. They also do really happy music that's happy, like Friday I'm in Love. But I often find the Cure have got some really beautiful, like kind of up-tempo moments that are cleverly disguised with dark lyrics and dark themes, and even visually there's a darkness to them, and Robert Smith in particular. And sometimes you don't know that you don't feel yourself bopping. And so you go, holy shit, this music's kind of making me dance, but feel a little bit dark and sad at the same time. I think they've always done that well, the Cure.
That's a good reference, because in Teaching Me About Dying, you remember there's that there's a kind of subtle guitar. I think it's like, is it a 6-string bass? Motif?
Yeah, the high bass thing.
How does it go? I'm like
with the chorus. Yeah,
and I remember when we were writing that, I felt like we were kind of trying to like capture a bit of the Cure in the song a little bit there with that tone.
Yep. That's like a hallmark of that era. Of the Cure and New Order. as well. I think the New Order did that a bit too. And, you know, even like before New Order, Joy Division, I mean, think of the name Joy Division and what that refers to, but also Love Will Tear Us Apart. I mean, it's quite a up-tempo song. It's almost a disco beat, you know, almost, but played, you know, almost like a post-punk way with quite dark lyrics, but there's a hopefulness to it as well. It's beautiful and it's amazing, really. And it's a banger. So that's another example there.
Yeah, okay. And is it true that the song, it started on a Casio, the idea started on a Casio little keyboard, little portable battery-operated keyboard?
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
We were at a studio in Launceston working on, I guess we were working on that My Own Pool of Light, that whole album. And it wasn't our studio, and there was just this little Casio keyboard, and I think I just leant over and just pressed the first button of the beat, which happened to be like, there was all these settings that it happened to be set to. So it was set to pop, and that's where that it started. And I'm not a very good keyboard player or guitarist, and so I started playing, and I think that's why, in a way, the song is the way it is, because it's like, it's all these major chords, because that's really the only ones I know how to play. And so it's like C and G and stuff. And I remember we started mucking around on it, and I was like, teach me about dying. And I remember that Oscar and I sometimes we have this thing where in the studio, you'll be kind of doing whatever, and then suddenly you'll get a sense like, oh, something's happening, something good's happening, and we'll kind of give each other like the side eye, and you almost don't want to you wouldn't be like, that sounds really good, that could be an idea. You just kind of, and I remember Oscar sort of quietly setting up a mic and being like, yeah, just do that again, mate. Yeah, just keep going, and we just kind of like got stuck into it. And it's like you don't want to look directly at the idea for a minute, just while it sort of comes into the room and like starts to form and exist. And Teach Me About Dying was one of those rare songs, and quite rare for us, that, you know, that you do hear about. You hear musicians always talking about it. One of those ones that actually did just tumble out, like in an hour or so. We kind of had like chords, like sections, chorus, and most of the verses, and we did kind of nuance it. And there was a lot of mixing and stuff that happened later, but the big shapes of the song all came out in that one evening.
Wow, okay. And so how does that compare to, so let's talk now about the song Darwinism, which was a finalist in 2016 in the Vanda and Young competition.
Yeah, we're like Darwinism. What's that song again? How does that one go?
I can't remember anything.
Is that a Holy Holy song?
It's so long ago. My memory is so bad, but yes.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it, Rod. But it is a Holy Holy song, and it was in the competition.
Well, let me fill you in about the song. Is that, I mean, and for a year, ever since I heard about the song, I assumed it was a reference to Charles Darwin, but I think there is still a slight bit of that in there. But was it actually inspired by a trip to Darwin, that you had a night out in Darwin, and then the next morning, Tim, you went to the bathroom, sleeping, and started?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's funny. Like sometimes with songs, and there's actually quite a few songs on the new album, like Port Road and Shoreditch and stuff. They are like, they refer to where we were when the original voice memo was recorded for that idea, and sometimes, you know, it starts off as a demo name, and then you're like, oh, we'll change that later. And you work away, and then you get towards the end of the record, and you just become really attached to the name, and it sticks. And it was a bit like that. We went up to Darwin for Darwin Fest and played this wonderful, beautiful festival up there. And it was balmy and tropical and awesome. And we had such a nice time. And yeah, I wrote just that little like riff in the, in the toilet of the hotel, because I think people were sleeping, so I was like trying to find somewhere quiet to record. And then we sort of took that into the studio and fleshed it out. And the other thing I can remember is there's a line in that song which is I did the dishes and found peace in the sink.
Yeah.
I did the dishes and found peace in the sink. Just for 20 minutes, I did not have to think. And that emptiness felt just like happiness. And that was a lyric that I kind of bower-birded from that cartoonist called Lunik. He has this comic strip called The 7 Kinds of Happiness. And it's like, you know, the happiness from, like, you know, seeing a dog, and the happiness from, there's all these different ones. And the last one is the happiness from doing dishes. And we could really relate to that, because there's something about, like, you know, when life's busy and you've got all these things to do and you just have your hands in this sink of warm water, and the warmth of the water even makes you feel nice. And then the other thing is, like, you don't have, because you're doing something, you don't have to worry about doing something else. So you can just relax for a minute, and it's like meditation. And then you just slowly but surely achieve something. And that sense of achievement with each clean dish is like good enough for happiness, you know, really.
So really there is nothing that won't inspire you when you're writing a song, whether it's doing the dishes or seeing that cartoon. Something. So are you just a perpetual sponge for anything that you see? But does that apply to both of you?
Well, I think maybe Tim has to be a slightly more sponge-like, or Tim is perhaps slightly more sponge-like. He talks about the bowerbird thing. So I think Tim's ears are kind of pricked up, or his periscope or his antenna is constantly up to what's kind of meaningful around him and us as people. Whereas, because I'm less involved with the lyrics, for good reason. I think in a songwriting partnership, it's really important to have not a hard and fast, but like a natural division of labor. It works well that way. I think, you know, Lennon and McCartney, they never wrote together. It wouldn't have worked out. They wrote separately and they just credited them together, you know. So I think because they would have crossed over too much, they would have. I think that their skill sets would have clashed. But I'm not equating us with Lennon and McCartney, by the way. What's the other one? Elton John and Bernie Taupin. There you go. I'm Elton John and Tim's Bernie Taupin.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely.
My point is, I'm more doing the music. I'm dealing with the sounds, and so there's a little bit. It's not that they're separate from the world at all. That they're related, but there's a little bit. They're a little bit less obviously related to messages in the world.
You can still be sponge-like, though, whether you're hearing another piece of music or even just hearing a sound outside that inspires some sort of production technique or a riff or something like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I actually don't think I am that sponge-like, though, to be honest.
Okay.
I think I was when I was a bit younger, but now I'm trying to. I think sometimes sponge with sounds. It can be a bit more. There's a risk of. I don't know. I feel like sometimes if I'm hearing sounds around me, there's a risk I'll be too influenced by them or something like that, and want to kind. It's like the sponge has a slightly different. It works differently with sound rather than lyrics, I think.
Gotcha.
Something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I'm trying to think it through as I'm talking, but I try sometimes to just not think about what's going on in the world, you know?
Sure. But Tim, that's the case for you. You're a sponge in that regard?
Yeah, I definitely always have my ear out for things that do just strike me. Like I was listening to an American political podcast the other day, and for example, and they were talking about some senator or some political actor in America, and he was sort of pretending he took Donald Trump's endorsement because it would sort of benefit him politically, but you know they were sort of saying that it didn't sit well with him. And then one of the analysts said, you have to be careful because you are who you pretend to be. And then they just moved on, and I was like, you are who you pretend to be. And I like wrote that down. That sort of just popped out. It's like, well, that could be a really great line. Like, and that few words, that's one of those great words as a chorus where just those few words, you are who you pretend to be, in the mind of a listener, there's a whole story there, you know, and you'll probably apply it to yourself and you'll apply it to people around you, and there's so much meaning in it. So, you know, that's an example of something else. What do you reckon, Oz?
Well, let's, yeah, Rod, if you don't mind, we might actually now segue into a songwriting session.
I'll tell you another funny one that happened the other day was my son was texting with my dad, and you know how like on the text of the phone now, like you write one word and then on the bottom of this, above the keyboard, it goes like, it gives you 3 possible words that you might want next, and that's all he does. He just constantly just chooses from those 3 words because he can't really read or write. And so he composed this very long text to my dad, and it was the most bizarre sentence, and it was all about like, you know, being like what you need to be happy and not having enough money and all. It was like, and I was like, these lyrics, the lyrics of this weird predictive text of my son writing to my dad is just like gold for lyrics. So I'm gonna also steal that and ferret it away.
I feel like album number 5 just unfolding in front of us.
Yeah, it's an AI. Just because when I write an email with my Gmail, sometimes it suggests words, and I'm like, am I thinking for myself anymore, or am I saying, yep, oh, that's what I want. Oh, great, email's written, sent. Shit, I've just signed up for something I didn't mean to. You know, oh, great, thank you, Google.
Sounds great. It's funny when they do this.
It's always this, sounds like, great.
Yeah, perfect.
Question about Darwinism before we move on to the new record. It sounds that the arrangement with the brass and the piano just kind of building to that crescendo towards the end. That sounds like it would have been a lot of fun to actually to write and to record. What are your memories of that coming together? Just that build and build, that bombast just building towards the end of the song.
Yeah, it feels like a different time, because subsequent to that album, and not because we don't like that album, I do. We did that with a producer named Matt Redlick, who he's in Melbourne. He's formerly from Brisbane, a great producer, and we were doing a sort of a style of music that was more rock band feeling. I suppose. And subsequent to that, we've kind of moved a little bit more into the computer world a bit, I suppose. And so my memory of it was different to what we're doing now, you know? And we were doing big sounds and big horns and big pianos and really digging in. The drums are much more like cracking and more room and big guitar sounds. And it's funny, that idea that you are a coherent self that exists across time, and yet I look back at that time and I think, who was that?
Wow.
It feels so different. And you know, so and obviously we play songs from our past. We haven't played that one in a while. We haven't played any songs live in a while, actually, because of COVID. But you know, it feels like a different version of me, that song, you know, and that's great. I'm down with that. We did all those horns and those layers of horns, and I remember we got a horn player, Ross Irwin, who's a really great horn player, and we did layers upon layers of horns of like just parts, you know, like specific notes, and then got him also to just rip over the top in the background and just build up to this kind of cacophony. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's quite a noise, you know, when we play it live, which again we haven't done for a while. When we do, I'm like, bloody hell, that's a racket.
Right.
I actually have a bit of a like penchant to play it now, like, because I think I listened to it the other day because somebody that song has a sort of famous in holy fan circles misheard lyric. A lot of people think that the opening lyric is I fell asleep on the couch watching Rage.
Oh, right.
And the lyric is actually I fell asleep on the couch while she read. I fell asleep on the couch while she read. Anyway, that came up the other day on social. Somebody messaged us and we made a post about it and I watched it. But the horns are really beautiful. I noticed in retrospect, and we recorded it at Head Gap. And Head Gap is a studio in Melbourne that has a grand piano in the live room, a big black, beautiful grand piano. And so some of that sort of thing is a bit like the little Casio battery-powered keyboard from Teach Me About Dying, which happened to be in the room. Like, you know, the grand piano is on the record because there was one there. And I at that time, I was really into the band The National. And there was something about the, like, and the big build, like the sort of orchestral horns and stuff that I felt was sort of in that kind of world. But fond memories, and it does go off that song live. I think there's something about the beginning of it that I find a bit crass or something, sonically, like, wah, 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 and I'm like, it's like, so I think I've been a bit embarrassed by it, but I probably should just get over it and enjoy it. The ending, where it gets to is beautiful.
It really is. It really is. Well, Oscar, you were saying that feels like a different version of you. So with Hello, My Beautiful World, that presumably sounds like Oscar Dawson in 2021. What were you, when you had that initial songwriting session before the world went into lockdown, and I think that was perhaps only the first main session for the record, did you go into that session thinking that the album that you've ended up with, was that the album that you were attempting to make, or is it just more organic than that?
I think, and it's always annoying, the answer that I think the annoying answer is that it's a balance. And I hate saying that because I want to be really like strong and black and white about things, but actually no, it's a balance, because I think there are heaps of moments of organic exploration that just happen where you don't feel like you're in control, and it's just this amorphous bubble of sound that becomes a song, and that's great, and that has to happen. But there's also a fairly good dose of intent as well. And I think that when we went into that first writing session, there was intent, which was valuable and good. Like, we were like, let's try and write really simple songs. Let's just have a kick drum and maybe a bass guitar and a voice, and just really, really like strip it back. And I have been interested for a while now in, which you might have picked up from what I was saying about Darwinism, in moving a little away from that rock band thing in a room. I don't know why. I guess maybe I feel like I've been living that style of music for so many years. I kind of like, I want to explore some different sounds and some different textures. And so we went into that room just thinking, yeah, let's, like, we didn't have really, really, really hard rules, but just some intent, you know, let's, set up a kick drum, some chords, some voice, and then write something, and then, you know, close the session and do another one and just keep it simple, and don't get too lost in little guitar riffs and twinkles and, you know, too many details too early. And so I think there was an intent in making the record that came from there, which was just, I mean, personally, writing something that can work on a stage and that can get people dancing, which is interesting given the way the world's been subsequent to that session. But we'll get back there. Again, moving a little away from that kind of hard and abrasive rock band sound. And so, there was that, and that balance, I guess, between having that intent and writing some songs going, let's just keep this, you know, more kind of, poppy, and, you know, like, do we need guitar on this song? Do we need live drums on this song, for example? Let's not just do things because that's what bands do. But then, look, lots of things have happened subsequently that are organic, and that you got to keep an open mind and go with. And I think it's just finding that balance is where the art really happens, I suppose. So I hope that's a good answer.
That's a very good answer. Thank you. Is it, you mentioned that idea of wanting to make music that makes people move at your shows. Am I right in thinking that the Lord cover that you do, or that you have done previously, was one of the catalysts for that thinking? Because you'd play that song and you would notice a difference in the crowd. Is that correct?
Well, it's a really good song, that, you know, like, it does make people move as well. So we played that song and we're like, shit, yeah, that song really works. And I think it's a combination of it being being a really famous song, being a well-known song by a really massive, big artist, being Lord. But I think it's green light, yeah, which is green light. But I think it's more pure than that. I think it is actually, it's not just because people know it. I think it is just like a banger. You know, like it's not just like, oh, people don't just go, oh, it's Lord's song, let's amp it up more now. It just makes them move more. But it's not just that. Teach Me About Dying, which is an up-tempo song with like this kick drum. It gets people moving. It's just like, wow, that felt good.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and we're not quite that mercenary. I'm not making it out like we must succeed in making people dance, but I'm just saying, you have those moments and you think, wow, I think that's a really great moment and a great feeling. And I want to fashion that a little more, basically.
Oh. But it's such a diverse record in terms of it covers such a wide spectrum of music. When you even think about, you know, a song like The Aftergone paired with the title track, which is that great spoken word piece, Tim, with those swirling strings underneath it. Tim, I mean, writing a spoken word song like that, again, something that just happened organically and you had the idea for the orchestral arrangement for it?
Well, the truth is about the orchestral arrangement is that, so we were writing these demos, Oscar and I, occasionally together, but mostly remotely. And we were sending them back and forth, and we engaged this string arranger from Brisbane called Toby Alexander, who was on the stream earlier. Nice guy. Hi, Toby, if you're out there. He's awesome. And so we were doing these demos just from our home studios, and sort of because of the beauty of like that technology, you know, we could never have afforded, for example, to hire an orchestra and be like, hey, can you try a whole orchestra on this demo that we've just started? But these are all software strings that sound really beautiful, and that technology has come a really long way. So it afforded us this incredible freedom to like come up with an idea and hear that idea like within a week with a full orchestral string arrangement. And if we didn't quite like it, we could go back and be like, yeah, that sounds good, but can you make it darker, or can you make it this, or can you change this section? And so Toby wrote did this arrangement for Shoreditch, another song on the record. And he would send them through, and they would arrive, you know, there'd be this bing on my phone, and then it'd be like, hey, see below, link to the string arrangement for this song. And I got into the habit of just listening to the string arrangements by themselves without the song, and I found them really moving and beautiful. And we already had the album title. The album title already exists, Hello, My Beautiful World. And I was out running and listening to the string arrangement for Shoreditch. And as I was running and listening, I just started saying just the album title, Hello, My Beautiful World, Hello, My Beautiful World. And then that just led me to kind of go like, hello this, hello that. And then I kind of like was like, oh, it just sort of suddenly felt like this pattern. And I remember coming home somewhat desperate, because it was a bit like that moment of like the side-eye moment of like, oh, I think there's some idea here that is alive in this moment. And I fired up this microphone in this room, and I just quickly, and I loaded the string arrangement into Logic, and I just kind of started, hello this, hello that, hello this, hello that. And then I did a few takes of it, then I stopped and I got a pen and paper, and then I had to take the kids to the pool. And the kids were swimming in the pool, and I had headphones on, and I had a clipboard and a piece of paper, and I was walking around the pool trying to make sure that they weren't drowning. And I was just thinking, like, I had this idea of doing an essay of the whole sort of like universe, really. And I wrote down all these different ones, and then I got back from the pool and I sort of started arranging them into rhymes and so on. And then I sat there and just recorded a whole bunch of them. And the take that is on the album is actually from those demos. I did try to re-record it, but Oscar and I felt like that one, there was something about the intention in that moment that was like kind of unbeatable. And maybe because I really wasn't expecting it to go anywhere, there was like maybe some naturalness about it. But yeah, I definitely wasn't like, I would like to write a spoken word poem on this album. It just kind of, one thing led to another.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised, to be honest, that anybody would let it be on the record, especially like Oscar and then like the label and our manager and stuff. And I was really it meant a lot to me that Oscar in particular was like liked it, and it's his beautiful, all the chords and the journey of the tempo of the song is Oscar's composition below it, and so it's another like example of the collaboration that Oscar and I have that that has been so fruitful and like fulfilling and enjoyable for me and for us, I assume.
Yeah.
Does that suggest? I mean, look, have there been songs? What you were just saying there about you kind of thought you may not even be able to get it on the album because of management and Oscar and everyone's got to like it. Have there been songs or a song in your career as Holy Holy where you've really had to convince the other person? Tim, you had to convince Oscar. Oscar, you had to convince Tim. A song that you really had to fight for?
No, I don't think so. There is like a little sort of back catalogue of songs that we did not release. Like there are like a couple of songs off each of the records that got fairly developed, but then we didn't release. But I don't know if either of us would really be into like if one person didn't want it on the record, then I don't think the other one would really want it on there either. So the idea of like fighting to get a song on would be, I wouldn't really think I'd want something on if Oscar didn't want it on. Would you agree with that? Am I forgetting a?
Yeah, I'm not. I can't think of any that were like, oh, really, this song must be on. I mean, it's. We are also, you hear sometimes you hear stories about bands, projects where they put out an album and there's interviews and they're like, oh yeah, we wrote like 40 songs and we whittled it down to 10. I'm like, why did you write 40 songs? What a fucking waste of time. Like, why would you do that? Surely you just write 10 like good ones. And but I think this is what I think happens. I don't think they actually do write 40 songs. I reckon maybe they write 40 ideas and dribble them around and then finish 10 properly and go, okay, that's great. Maybe there's a couple of extra. Maybe there's 13 finished. Yeah. Maybe they record 13 or 14 and put 11 on the album. Anyway, we've always done this thing where there are ideas that exist that don't end up going anywhere, but mainly what we finish goes on the album, basically.
Gotcha.
Basically. And that's not because we're like, nail it every time. But it's because like if we're going to pursue an idea, we pursue it because we like it, think it's good and it's got some legs, and sometimes we're wrong, but it's almost like I think there's a austerity to our approach insofar as that we don't just hack away till we got an album, we kind of focus our time and focus our efforts, and there has to be lyrics, there has to be meaning, and if that isn't there, then there's no point working on the piece of music, And there was a couple off this record that didn't make it where we tried them, and some of them were just obvious, It's just like, oh, this one's not going to go on the record, And sometimes Tim's like, I really don't like that, and I was like, yeah, cool, yep, no worries. We've got other songs that we both like, so that's fine. And there's one song that I remember I worked on quite a bit that I thought, oh, this has got legs, but kind of pushed it a bit, and but never pushed it in the sense of like this has to go on the record. More like, hey man, what do you think of this? Hey man, how's this now? And it's like, it just never got there. And if I'm honest with myself, it didn't, so yeah. It just happened.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about that, I think you're talking about,
it was all messed up. That one.
Oh yeah.
I worked on that so much, but it was never right,
Yeah, the problem with that one was, which would be hard to overcome with production, was the thing that I didn't like was my lyric.
Yeah.
So you could change the production. I mean, and sometimes you can overcome a lyrical thing with production. Like you can make it sound less, whatever. But I do secretly have a plan at some point to do a release of, because there is like 2 or 3 songs off the first album, 2 songs off the second album. Like there's almost an album worth of B-sides that I think fans would love to hear, and they all sit within the era of that band. They're made in the same studios with the same players, and some of them like completely finished, mixed and mastered, or like so. It is a B-sides and rarities, you know, ready to go.
Nice. Look forward to Oscar and Tim, I could honestly speak to you all night, but I won't. I won't take up. Thanks so much for joining us on the live stream. It's so great to speak to you both. A reminder that Hello My Beautiful World, of course, is out right now, and presumably there's going to be hopefully some rescheduled tour dates announced soon, because can't wait to see you back on stage. Just a reminder about the Vanda and Young Global Songwriting Competition. Entries are still open. Enter at apraamcos.com.au. And if you want the music credits, and who doesn't, then you should go to Jaxsta.com, which is the world's biggest database of official music credits, making sure that everyone who contributes to a piece of music gets credit for their work.
And hey, Rod, I just want to say thanks for Jaxsta. I think it's great because I used to love, you know, and I'm old enough to have, you know, gone down to Dixon's Recycled and pick up CDs. And, you know, I used to just sit there reading the liner notes, reading the credits, every song. I was obsessed with who's playing keys, who's playing the bass. And there's been this dark age of digital that I think we're overcoming. We in the industry are overcoming, when like seeing credits on online is actually really great. It's important, but it's also just interesting and good. So yeah, it's great.
Thank you. And I was exactly the same. That's how I discovered music when I was a kid, looking at liner notes, looking at who produced what, and then seeing that producer's name on another record and listening to that. So yeah, it's super important and very important that everyone gets credit for their work. So thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Tim. Much appreciated.
Great to chat with you.
Yeah, good to chat, Rod. Good to see you. Although it's not face to face, it's almost. I'll hopefully see you in person soon.
I look forward to it. All right, have a great night, guys. Thank you so much.
Cool. Cheers,
See
mate.
you.
See you, mate. Yeah.
How do I do this? Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.